The summer heat of Montgomery, Alabama was suffocating the day Emily Grace came into the world. Her mother, Linda, only 20 years old, stared blankly at the ceiling of the small hospital room as the baby was placed on her chest. She should have felt joy, relief, hope. Instead, a heavy silence filled the space. Robert, the father, stood in the corner, his face stern, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes barely rested on the "she's healthy," the nurse said softly, trying to spark some warmth in the room. But Robert's jaw clenched. The silence screamed louder than any words. Linda knew what he was thinking, because she had heard it 100 times throughout her pregnancy. "I need a boy, a son to carry my name, someone to help on the farm, someone who can be now." The decision had been whispered about in the family for months. They were poor, barely scraping by. Robert's father had been clear. "Another girl is just another mouth to feed. You need a boy." Linda had cried herself to sleep so many nights, wishing she had the power to change reality. And now, as Emily Grace cried her first cries, Linda's heart broke in two. 2 days later, papers were signed. Linda pressed her lips against her baby's forehead one last time, inhaling her scent like a desperate memory she wanted to tattoo into her soul. "I'm sorry, my angel," she whispered, tears wetting the baby's soft blanket. Robert couldn't even look at her. When a social worker carried the child away, Linda's arms ached with emptiness, and her heart felt as though it had been ripped from her chest. Hundreds of miles away in Chicago, Sarah and Michael Parker were preparing their small home for the arrival of the child they had prayed for. After years of infertility treatments and heartbreak, the news that a baby girl was waiting for them in Alabama felt like a miracle. They painted the nursery yellow, filled it with stuffed animals, and placed a tiny crib by the window where sunlight streamed in. When they finally held the baby, renamed Anna Grace, tears flowed freely. Sarah pressed her cheek against the baby's, whispering promises of love and protection. Michael kissed her small fingers, already imagining the life they would build together. For them, this was not just adoption. It was salvation. Their prayers had been answered, their hearts finally complete. But destiny carries secrets. And even as Anna Grace grew in a home overflowing with warmth, the unanswered questions of her beginning lay quietly in the shadows, waiting for the day they would demand to be heard. Anna Grace's life in Chicago would be filled with laughter and stability, but deep inside, faint whispers of her past began to stir earlier than anyone expected. Before we continue, tell me, what would you have done in Linda's place? Could you ever let go of your own baby? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of Anna Grace's journey. Anna Grace grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Chicago, where the winters were long and the summers were filled with the sound of children playing on the sidewalks. Sarah and Michael adored their daughter, showering her with love and affection. Every birthday was celebrated with balloons and homemade cakes. Every summer meant trips to Michigan, where Anna built sandcastles by the lake and begged her parents for just 5 more minutes before leaving the water. Her parents were determined to give her not just comfort, but identity. Sarah read bedtime stories about courage and kindness, while Michael introduced her to baseball games and taught her how to ride a bike in the park near their home. They were the kind of parents who kept every art project, every crayon drawing, every photograph of her first steps. To the outside world, Anna Grace was the picture of a happy child. But inside her, small shadows began to form. At first they were faint, just whispers she didn't fully understand. In 2nd grade, her class was assigned a project: create a family tree. While the other children filled their pages with names of grandparents, great-grandparents, and cousins, Anna hesitated. Sarah and Michael had always been honest with her. She knew she was adopted, but they had very few details to give. When she raised her hand and asked, "What if you don't know who your family is?" the teacher paused, unsure how to respond. That night, Anna stared at her half-finished tree and felt a sting of emptiness she couldn't quite name. By the time she turned 13, curiosity had taken root. One rainy afternoon, while searching the attic for old photo albums, she found a small cardboard box sealed with tape. Inside were a few official documents: hospital papers, adoption records, and a thin bracelet with faded letters. Montgomery General Hospital. Her hands trembled as she held it. For the first time, she had a tangible piece of her past. She didn't tell Sarah and Michael right away. Part of her feared hurting them, feared that searching for her biological family would be seen as a betrayal. But the questions only grew louder. Why was I given away? Did they love me at all? Do I have brothers or sisters somewhere? High school brought even more tension. During a social studies project about ancestry, her classmates proudly presented stories of immigrant great-grandparents, old photographs, and cultural traditions. Anna stood in front of the class with almost nothing to share. She mumbled a few lines about her adoptive family, then sat down quickly, cheeks burning with shame. That night she cried into her pillow, wishing she could ask someone, anyone, the questions that haunted her. Sarah noticed. "Sweetheart," she said one evening, sitting on Anna's bed, "are you thinking about your birth family?" Anna hesitated, then nodded. Sarah took her hand. "You have every right to wonder. And when the time is right, we'll help you search." But Anna didn't feel ready yet. Not then. She carried her questions like secret weights, tucked into the corners of her heart. By the time she entered college, however, the pull became impossible to ignore. She knew she couldn't build her future without first understanding her past. The whispers had grown into a roar. Anna Grace was about to begin a journey she had dreamed of for years, a search that would test her patience, her courage, and her very identity. College life in Chicago was full of new experiences for Anna Grace. Late nights studying in the library, coffee shops buzzing with energy, and conversations with friends about dreams and futures. But even amidst the excitement, her mind often drifted to the unanswered questions of her past. By her sophomore year, she decided she could no longer ignore the pull. It was time to search. Her first step was simple: contacting the state of Alabama to request her original birth certificate. Weeks later, she received a formal letter with a cold refusal. Record sealed, access denied. The words stung. It felt like a locked door slammed in her face. But Anna was not easily discouraged. She turned to the internet, searching adoption forums, reading stories of others who had reunited with their families. Some found joy, others heartbreak, but all agreed on one thing: the search was worth it. That gave her courage. One evening, while scrolling through online resources, she discovered a non-profit organization in Birmingham dedicated to helping adoptees trace their origins. Nervous but determined, she picked up the phone and explained her story. On the other end was a warm, steady voice. Mrs. Henderson, a retired social worker who volunteered with the group. "Anna, I've been helping adoptees for over 30 years. Mrs. Henderson said. "It won't be easy, but if you're willing to be patient, we'll find something." That conversation marked the beginning of Anna's journey. Mrs. Henderson guided her through old hospital directories, church records, even newspapers from the mid-90s. Progress was painfully slow, but every small discovery felt like a treasure. First came confirmation of her exact time of birth. Then, after weeks of digging, a faded hospital log revealed her biological mother's maiden name, Linda Matthews. Anna stared at the name, whispering it aloud over and over as if trying to memorize the sound of her own history. The more she uncovered, the more the puzzle pieces began to fit. A breakthrough came when Mrs. Henderson tracked down a retired nurse who had worked at Montgomery General Hospital the year Anna was born. Over tea in her kitchen, the elderly woman recalled a memory that sent shivers down Anna's spine. "I remember a baby girl with the softest cry. They wrapped her in a pink blanket, but her mama looked so broken. She just kept whispering, 'Forgive me, forgive me.' I'll never forget it." For Anna, it was both comforting and heartbreaking. For the first time, she had proof that her biological mother had loved her, even in that moment of loss. Still, finding Linda Matthews in the vastness of Alabama was no easy task. The name appeared in phone directories, but many numbers were disconnected or outdated. Anna spent long nights making calls, each one a dead end. She began to wonder if she would ever truly find them. Then came another glimmer of hope. Mrs. Henderson uncovered property records for a small piece of farmland, registered under a Robert and Linda Arlen Matthews, just outside a town called Greenville. The possibility set Anna's heart racing. Could this be them? She booked a flight to Alabama, her hands shaking as she packed her bag. For the first time in her life, she was returning to the land of her birth, a place she had never known but somehow always carried within her. The Alabama air was thick and heavy when Anna stepped off the bus in Greenville. The small town felt worlds apart from Chicago's bustle. Dirt roads stretched beyond the horizon, and old wooden houses stood weathered by years of sun and rain. Anna's heart pounded with every step. She clutched the piece of paper with the Matthews address written on it, her palms slick with sweat. The property lay at the edge of town, a modest farmhouse surrounded by worn fences and fields where corn once grew. As she approached, a woman in her late 40s stepped onto the porch. Her hair was pulled back in a bun and her eyes carried decades of untold stories. Anna froze. "Linda Matthews?" she asked, her voice trembling. The woman stared, confusion crossing her face, then realization. Tears welled instantly in her eyes. "Oh, my Lord," she whispered, covering her mouth with shaking hands. Robert appeared behind her, older now, his frame bent from years of hard labor. He looked at Anna, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the cicadas in the trees. Linda rushed forward, pulling Anna into her arms. The embrace was desperate, trembling, as though trying to make up for 20 years of absence in a single moment. Anna let herself sink into it, but her chest burned with questions. Robert, however, remained on the porch, his hands gripping the railing. Inside, they sat at the small kitchen table. Linda poured sweet tea, though her hands shook so badly the glasses clinked against the pitcher. "I've prayed for this day," she said, her voice cracking. "I never thought I'd get to see you again." Anna stared at them, her voice barely a whisper. "Why? Why did you give me away?" The words cut through the room like a knife. Linda broke down, her sobs raw and heavy. "We were so poor, baby. We didn't know how we'd survive another child. And Robert, he wanted a boy. Everyone did. They said another girl would just be a burden. I thought you'd have a better life without us." Robert's jaw tightened. He looked down, unable to meet Anna's eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he muttered. Anna's heart pounded louder in her ears. Years of wondering, of imagining 1,000 scenarios led to this moment. And yet the truth felt even heavier than she had expected. Her throat tightened as she spoke the words she had carried silently for so long. "What if I had been a boy?" The room fell into suffocating silence. Robert flinched, his face pale as though struck by the question. Linda sobbed harder, shaking her head. "Don't say that, please. It was never about you. It was about our weakness, our fear." But Anna's words had already landed. They hung in the air like a sentence neither parent could escape. Robert finally looked at her, his eyes red. "If you'd been a boy, things would have been different. And that's my greatest shame." Tears streamed down Anna's face. She had braced herself for pain, but hearing it spoken aloud tore her apart in ways she couldn't prepare for. Still, beneath the anguish, there was clarity. The truth, no matter how brutal, was better than silence. They cried together at that table, 3 lives bound by blood, broken by choices, yet trying desperately to stitch together something resembling forgiveness. The days that followed were heavy with emotions Anna could hardly name. After years of wondering, she finally had answers, but they came wrapped in pain. She spent 2 more days in Greenville, walking the dirt paths around the farmhouse, listening to her mother's memories, and watching her father wrestle silently with regret. Linda tried to make up for lost years in every small gesture. She cooked biscuits and gravy, pressed a faded quilt into Anna's hands, and whispered, "I love you," every chance she had. Robert, though still distant, began to soften. One evening, he sat across from Anna on the porch, the crickets filling the silence between them. "I was wrong," he said at last, his voice breaking. "I let pride and ignorance steal from us all. If I could go back—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll find it in you." Anna didn't answer right away. She studied his weathered face, the weight of his words settling deep in her heart. Forgiveness wasn't instant, It was a journey. But hearing him admit his failure was the first step toward something new. Before leaving Alabama, Anna discovered another piece of her story. She had a younger half-brother, Daniel, who was 16. Meeting him was surreal. He looked at her with wide eyes, both curious and shy. "I didn't know I had a sister," he said softly. Anna smiled, fighting back tears. "Now you do." Back in Chicago, Anna faced another challenge: how to tell Sarah and Michael about everything she had learned. She feared they might feel replaced, or worse, that her search had lessened their role in her life. But when she finally sat them down and shared every detail, their reaction was nothing but love. Sarah pulled her into a hug. "You'll always be our daughter, but I'm glad you know where you came from. Every piece of your story matters." Michael added quietly, "And maybe one day, we can meet them too." Those words gave Anna an idea. Weeks later, she arranged a video call between her two families. On one side of the screen, Sarah and Michael sat nervously in their living room. On the other, Linda and Robert appeared, awkward and emotional. The first few moments were stiff, but soon stories began to flow. About Anna's childhood in Chicago, about the Matthews' life in Alabama, about the bridge they were all slowly building together. It wasn't perfect. It would never erase the pain of the past. But it was real. And it was healing. Months later, Anna invited Linda, Robert, and Daniel to Chicago for Thanksgiving. The table was crowded that night. Two families, two worlds colliding. Linda brought cornbread and sweet tea. Sarah cooked her famous turkey. Daniel laughed with Michael over football, while Robert sat quietly, humbled but present. As Anna looked around the table, her heart swelled. This wasn't the family she had once dreamed of. It was messier, more complicated, but it was hers. Her journey had begun with a heartbreaking question: what if I had been a boy? Now she realized the answer no longer defined her. What mattered wasn't the past that had nearly broken her, but the love she chose to embrace in the present. She raised her glass, her voice steady. To family. Not the one we expect, but the one we build. To forgiveness. To love. Around the table, glasses clinked, smiles appeared. And for the first time, Anna felt truly whole. Family is not just about blood. It is about truth, forgiveness, and the courage to love beyond mistakes. What do you think? Can love truly heal even the deepest wounds? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of family.